Osaka syndrome linked me a video of a debate, although it's not really much of a debate because it's more like one person just interviewing the other person. But they disagree, so I guess it's a debate between some guy and basically two YouTubers, one of whom is Unlearn Economics, who's a YouTuber I quite like, and the other one I don't remember their name. I hadn't heard of them prior to this. Because I've been trying to figure out economics recently, and I am not having fun. Economics fucking sucks. It's boring, it's full of numbers, and no one knows anything. So it's like, even when you learn things, you're not really learning anything, but you're just learning that no one knows anything. But everyone, I don't know, it's really fucking stupid, and I hate the fact, but now that I know how little I know about economics, I can't be satisfied with it, but it's impossible to learn anything. It's actually evil. It's actually economics is actually a thought hazard, because once you know that you don't know anything about economics, and you know how, and you find out oh, actually turns out fucking everything political relies on economics, and it's oh, so now I guess I just have to. It's oh, if you were sitting here oh, everything political turns out to rely on, I don't know, fucking imperialism or something. Oh, all of this capitalist stuff relies on imperialism. It's okay, I guess I'll just go look up imperialism. What the fuck? There's algae growing. It's been so long since I've touched this that green matter is growing in here. That's kind of crazy. I wonder if there's any copper pots or anything. Have I created an accidental biosphere by just not changing this water for months and months? That's kind of cool. Anyway, so you just go and learn about imperialism or whatever, or if it's oh, it's all because of this and that. But with economics, it's even worse because everything relies on economics, and then you look it up and no one knows what the fuck it is. It's all just this hodgepodge of all this shit. It's not it's there are a whole bunch of different ideas and none of them can fit together in any way, and sorry, I'm kind of getting distracted here by being very frustrated because it's a thought hazard. The once you know it exists, you can never be satisfied again in your life unless you just pick a side arbitrarily with what makes sense morally to you. But I don't have the ability to do that with anything, so it's not an option for me. Someone like Osaka syndrome can be well, I'm already a Marxist, so I'll just be a Marxist when it comes to economics. But I can't be like that because I'm oh, I guess I'm kind of mostly a leftist, but then again, I disagree with some things, and I'm I need to decide for myself. But then the problem is, I can't decide for myself because none of them make any sense. None of the ideas make any sense. They're all super, everything about economics is incredibly counterintuitive to me. And every single branch of it's not you have a populist branch of economics. It doesn't exist. There's no simple, easy to understand well, if you do this, obviously money will be better for everyone. No, that doesn't exist. Everything is it turns out giving people less money means they have more money, and all stuff like that. It's all fucking stupid. And I hate it. And I hate it because I don't understand it, and I'm trying to understand it, but the more I try and understand it, the worse I feel. Sorry, that was not what this video is supposed to be about. So Osaka syndrome linked me this debate, and as I was watching the debate, I was understanding the way these people look at politics, which I think includes Osaka syndrome herself, is actually just fundamentally very different from how I look at politics. And I'm I don't understand where these people are coming from at all. These people have a radically different view of things than I do, and I don't relate to it. Which is they're sitting here talking about you got to have worker co-ops because democracy and alienation and it would be better for the economy if we did this, and everyone will be happier, and look at how efficient and effective this particular area in Italy has been, and they have incentivized worker co-ops, and it's oh, look at the Nordic model and how people report being happier, and then, well, can you really trust those self-reported happiness statistics? Blah blah. It's oh, debating oh, would this actually be better for the economy or whatever? This is not how I see it. I think this is where Osaka syndrome. This is how Osaka syndrome gets their ideas too. And this is how a lot of like leftists get their ideas too. But this has never been where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from, I'm just not sure people understand this, or maybe I haven't made this clear, or maybe I just assumed that everyone felt this, but it doesn't seem like everyone feels this. Where I'm coming from is I open up my phone to watch a YouTube video and I get an ad for TikTok, and TikTok is telling me, come here, and it's something like experience authenticity. It was like the tagline or something. It was like an ad for TikTok, and it said like experience authenticity, and then it had like a TikTok dance in the background. And like you see that, and then I just think like, oh, this is like viscerally evil. Like I don't understand how people look at the world and they're just like, how can we improve things? This has never been my experience. My experience has always been, I look at the world and I get the obvious, like, self-evident fact that, like, everything that's happening right now is so bad, and all I want is to be as far away from this as possible. I just want to be as much not this as possible. Like, oh, if we got capitalism, I want to do none of that. If we got states, I want to do none of that. If we got nations, I want to do none of that. If we've got industrialization, none of that. Intellectual property, get rid. Like everything, I'm like, the world is so viscerally broken to me, and just like obviously nefarious evil. Anytime I look at it and I experience the world, I am just struck with this overwhelming sense that it's just bad and like so broken that the only way to fix it is to get to completely. It's not like, oh, we gotta do this because it's gonna make everything better. It's gonna make fucking. It's like socialism is like, you take capitalism's always really great and it freed people from the troubles of feudalism, right? And Marx is all like, oh, isn't capitalism so liberatory from how terrible feudalism is? And then, wow, what if we take like capitalism and like take out all the bad parts about worker exploitation and stuff like that, and democratize, like lack of democratization. Like we take all capitalism, we keep the fundamental structure, but we remove the stuff that's bad, like worker exploitation, lack of democracy, alienation. We remove all the bad stuff, but keep the fundamental structure, and then you've got communism. That's what communism is. And I'm like, no, I want to get the fundamental structure is the bad stuff. All of that other stuff is like fucking fairy dust, like worker exploitation, alienation. All of that stuff's just like a little layer sprinkled on top of. It's a little layer of shit sprinkled on top of a giant shit sandwich. We need to get rid of the sandwich. That's where I've always been coming from. Is like the sandwich is just self-evidently fucked. It's like I guess this is why I always related to like anarcho-nihilist stuff. Like the idea in Blessed is the Flame is that the world is so bad, it's literally like being led to your slaughter in a concentration camp. Like existing in the world is as bad as being in a concentration camp in literal Nazi Germany about to be gassed. That is the argument in Blessed is the Flame, and that is like the text that I like. Fundamentally, I'm like, yes, this represents what I feel. I don't think people understand that that's where I'm coming from. Maybe like I didn't understand that that's not where everyone else was coming from. That's actually what happened here. Like I always assumed that everyone who wants to have some sort of radical social change was coming from the same place I am, where they look at the world and they can easily notice that it is self-evidently like a fucking abomination, an affront to God or whatever. Antichrist, the Antichrist made it. Like I think, like I'm just a Gnostic. Like you know how like there's the Christian meme of like Gnostics look at like these beautiful hillsides and whatever, and they go, yes, this world really is created as evil or whatever. Whereas a Christian would look at that and be like, wow, the beauty of God's creation, you know. I'm a Gnostic in that situation. I look at like natural beauty or whatever. Nothing is naturally beautiful to me. Everything is just everything about the way the world is structured, organized, existing. Everything about it disgusts me on a visceral level. Like this is just how it's always been, And I thought this is just how it was for everyone who wanted to change the world. But it turns out they have like really minor problems with it. They're just like, people aren't happy enough, or like, or the workplaces aren't democratic enough. It's like these minor fucking issues that like people spend years debating about. And like that's what it actually is. That's what these people actually care about, is like not anything about the, anything. It's just like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could vote for my own boss? Who fucking there should be no bosses. There should be no labor. There's like wage labor. There's like I'm like 10 fucking layers deeper than you. This is why am I deeper than economics? Is this why I don't understand economics? Is because I'm operating on a level that's more fundamental than economics? I don't think so. Like, I feel like economics is more fundamental than the level I'm operating on, but then maybe there is no more or less fundamental. Maybe everything's just sort of floating and rhizomatically interconnected, and I'm like, you have to understand all of these weird fucking shit, and I don't understand any of it. I'm stupid, but I don't, it's not my fault that I'm stupid. It's fucking like, no one should have to be expected to know all of this, to just be like, look at TikTok. Look at TikTok and tell me anything about this is worth saving. Like, TikTok is not just a product of capitalism. It's a product of everything. It's a product of all human organization. And I'm like, we need to get the fuck rid of it. And these guys are like, no, what if TikTok was democratically owned by the workers? Wouldn't that be great? No, it wouldn't be great. It would be awful. It would be just as bad, if not worse. I mean, maybe not worse if it's probably better for you if you work there, but I don't work there. I don't understand. There's like, I've just sort of had this revelation that like maybe the reason that me and Osaka syndrome have never really seen 100, even though we have somewhat fairly similar political beliefs on the grand scheme of things. We're both like kind of left. Well, Lily is very lefty anarchist, and I'm like a weird post-lefty anarchist, right? But we're both like sort of fundamentally anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist kind of deal, right? And but some reason we like have never seen 100% eye to eye on politics, and I've been like, I think I've just figured out why. It's because like I see it all as fucked. I think we need to get rid of all of it, and I don't really like any. The idea really of anarcho-nihilism, the fundamental idea, is that anything would be preferable to this, and that's basically what I believe. But then again, like that's all on like an emotional, or not even necessarily emotional, but like on a, I guess actually emotional might be a good word. Maybe even deeper than emotional. Maybe like a sort of inhuman, or like a non-human, like non. I don't know. There's obviously rationality to it. It's not like an animal instinct thing, because you can like verbalize and explain why these things are bad, and I do that all the time. So it's not that. It's like a, I don't know. It's like trying to explain to someone. It's like trying to explain the color yellow to someone who's never seen the color yellow. It's one of those sorts of situations where it's like you just because anyway. Sorry, that's kind of its own thing. But it's like, when it comes to like the practical politics that these people are talking about, like the like unlearn economics was like, anarchism. If even if you could do it, it would take hundreds and hundreds of years. At the beginning of this interview, he's like, oh, in order to actually reorganize the world into a bunch of like small federated anarchist communities that are self-organizing and self-governing, that's such an airy, like aloof goal that it's like, even if it might be worth pursuing, which he's not convinced of, but he said even if it is worth pursuing, it's so different from our current society that like, like it's not going to actually happen in my lifetime, which I think is, a reasonable point if that's how you see things. If you're looking at things from this very practical standpoint, where you're like talking about individual policies, like, oh, the government could subsidize worker co-ops and therefore incentivize or have tax cuts for worker that sort of thing. If you're talking on this very practical level, then there's only really one thing I care about. The only thing I really care about is do I have access to the internet, food, and housing? That's literally all I care about politically. And like ideally on top of that, weakening or getting rid of intellectual property and copyright. Like, but really, as long as I have the ability to like eat, sleep in a safe place, and connect to the internet, like that's all I actually need in life. And you know what? I'd be probably still alive if I didn't have the internet. It would suck, but I wouldn't like kill myself. It would just suck, and I could be bored for a while. And then I'd probably do something useful with my life. So, like that's like you don't need anything more than that. You don't need like it's not even like, oh, I need to have delicious foods and high quality. Like even just I don't eat. I have I have the means to eat better food. Like I could. I don't, because I don't think it's worth the money. Like I eat cheap food, rice, lots of rice and beans and stuff like that, cheap food, because it's, you know, it's not. I have very simple actual needs, um, and any like half competent political system can meet my needs as long as it's just like, as long as there's not a famine. Like I just don't want to be starving to death. I don't want to be cold. Like I want a roof. And I would like to be able to talk to people on the internet so I can keep learning, because learning is what makes life interesting. Um, so I would like to have, which means, you know, having internet infrastructure or something similar to it. Like that's really all I want out of this all is can I do all that, and ideally can I do all that with as little work from me as possible. Like if you're a communist, you know, even if you're like some sort of like, I don't know, Maoist or some communist that I really don't agree with, as long as you're sitting here like, yeah, food and housing should be free, then I basically am okay with you. And if you're like an ANCAP, which is like the opposite of a communist, like a Maoist, if you're an ANCAP, as long as you're like, yeah, everyone should have the ability to easily afford food and housing, or something like that, then I'm also still like with like, that's like the basic premise of every. There is no political ideology that doesn't say everyone should have food and housing. So that's why none of this has ever mattered to me. Like I don't care about getting it more efficiently or like increasing worker happiness or whatever, because that's all bullshit. Like who fucking cares? As long as I personally and the people I care about are alive and able to learn and grow, then that's all that matters. Like beyond that, then I can't look at any of this other stuff without being like, but you've forgotten about the fundamental evil of every fucking social organization that exists. Like, how can you not see it? Like, it's obvious. It's right there. And you're like ignoring it and calling it something else. Or you're like calling it you're like, oh, there's this fundamental shit that like, I guess anyone who looks at it for 5 seconds can see. And then just calling that, oh, that's just alienation that you solve by putting workers in control of their own jobs. I'm in control of my own jobs and I still feel it. Like, oh, that's just, I don't know, fucking whatever you want to call it. And it's like, no, that is the whole thing. That is fundamental. That is essential to the whole operation, and we need to get rid of it. And then everyone's like, no, you can't get rid of it. I'm like, fuck you, fuck you. Well, you know, you're doing your own thing, and I get it. It's just not how I see it. Maybe not fuck you, you know. Maybe you just don't see it. Maybe you just don't see the fact that we're being led to our slaughter. Maybe to you it's not obvious, but it's never not been obvious to me. And it's like all these fucking, to me, all of this shit is minor issues. Like, how do we make an economy that's slightly more efficient by 10% to raise the GDP? And I'm like, fuck the GDP. Like, I don't want to, like, the existence of the GDP as a concept is, like, oppressive and evil. And then you're like, oh, that's just a fucking postmodernist word salad or whatever. Like, you gotta measure things. And I'm like, you're just choosing to measure economic fucking transactions as a measure of success. But I'm over here like, people should be generally self-sufficient and communities should be generally self-sufficient and operate outside of mainstream economies. You know, that's like a good way to do that. That like seems to work pretty well. It seems to work pretty well for all of human history until the last couple 100 years, and then you're like, no, all of human history was terrible until the last 100 years. Like, people in medieval Europe, they were actually in constant suffering and misery for hundreds of years. They just didn't do anything about it until the great, amazing fact of capitalism came along. Everyone was just slaves for hundreds of years and they hated it. And I'm like, but you read David Graeber. you know that people in the past weren't slaves, and that modern wage labor is much, much closer to slavery than serfdom ever was, really. And then you're like, no, but actually, if workers had democratic ownership of their workplaces and they voted for who they were, and I'm like, bro, like none of that matters. It's not that bit that's the problem. It's the working. That's just like that's like polishing a turd type of deal. It's like putting glitter on a shit. That's like, well, you know, everyone has to do this thing that sucks ass, and we all agree that it sucks really bad. But like, what if we could control exactly how it sucked? It's like you can vote for your own slave master, and I'm over here literally just like, what if there were no hospitals? What if we just burned them all down? Like, I'm just asking questions here. What would happen? What would happen if all of the psych wards suddenly exploded? What would happen if Google's internal server databases were all corrupted? Like, what would happen if we just got rid of governments without replacing them with anything? Like, what would happen if you just blew up factories? What would happen then? Actually, factories aren't even that bad. What would happen if you blew up office jobs? What would happen if David Graeber turned into a giant mech and then stamped on you? What would happen then, eh? I'm just asking questions. What would happen if David Graeber grew into a giant mechanical being and stepped on me? What would happen then? Would I die or would I survive? That's the question I'm asking here. Would I die or would I survive? Right? It's like, oh, everything would be better if only blah, blah, blah. No, nothing would be better. Nothing is ever better. I've always believed this ever since I first even gave any thought to politics. It has just been obvious to me. Any form of human social organization is innately shit. None of them work. None of them are can fucking stick around. None of them are stable. None of them are effective or efficient. None of them fucking work well. Right? You're always gonna have these shitty compromises, and it's like, oh, we should have these compromises instead of these compromises. That's literally all people are arguing for. Like capitalists, communists, anarchists, ANCAPs, fascists, Maoists, Gonzalo thought, Pol Potists, they're all just arguing oh, instead of having these compromises, we should have these compromises. And I'm like, what if we just had no fucking compromises? How about that? How about fucking no compromises? How about we stop trying so hard and just stuff that doesn't even work, by the way. It's all fantasy. People are there is absolutely fucking nothing more fantastical about me saying oh, what if we had independent anarchist federations with a sort of fluid systems of governance and power that could change depending on what was needed. There's nothing more fantasy about that than there is about what if the government fucking made a law that the worker co-ops needed to have tax cuts. Both of those are equally fanciful thinking. They're both equally likely to occur and stick around. What's actually going to happen is whatever the fuck techno-capital wants to happen, and none of us are in any control over that, right? All you can do is just fucking ride the tiger. All you can do is just cling onto its back and just desperately hope it doesn't throw you off. And if you do, and prepare while you're holding on. You need to be also preparing that one day you're going to be thrown off, and it's inevitable. You're going to get thrown off of the tiger's back at some point because you're not an aristocrat. You're not fucking that. So you need to prepare. You need to be as long as you can cling on to the tiger as long as possible, so that the longer you cling on, the more time you have to prepare for when it inevitably flings you off of its back. And then once you've been flung off of its back, you just need to have enough potatoes to survive for long enough before you die inevitably of old age anyway. Right? That's all you have. You have nothing else in life. You have nothing else in life to do. There is no improving the world. The world doesn't get better. The world gets either neutral or worse. There is no improving the world. The world has never gotten better. For humans, for animals, for itself, for Gaia, for God, for capital. The only thing the world gets better for is capital. It doesn't get better for humans. It doesn't get better for anything else. You can't fix it. And by the world, I mean the universe. Because even if the world was gone, right, life could still spring up somewhere else, and then all that would happen is it would die off the same as it dies off here. And everyone's sitting here oh, wouldn't it be great if fucking workers had more time off? And I'm fuck that. Who cares? Your entire life that you think is so important didn't happen. It doesn't. Everyone's just trying to convince themselves that their life is happening. Right? This is not the hikikomori way. the goal of the hikikomori is to honestly and sincerely believe that you have never existed. This is the goal. This is why you play video games and watch YouTube all day and make vlogs, right? The idea is to distance yourself from existence so that you, not just that you don't exist, that you melt into your fucking internet or video games, it's that you never were born. Because that's the only state that humanity could ever actually exist in, is to have never existed. That's the only state that is ever desirable, is to have never existed, to make it so you retrocausally were never born, and so your parents were never born, and their parents were never born, and that Adam and Eve never fucking took a bite out of the fucking tree. That's the only fucking goal ever. And everyone here like, oh, if only we had like a strong fascist government to get rid of all the fucking races I don't like. And I'm sitting here like, really? You think that's the fucking problem? You're sitting here like all of this shit's going on, Adam and Eve, and you're fucking here like, I don't like gay people? Like, really? That's your fucking problem with all of this? Is that like that tiny fucking, like, what's wrong with you? Are you retarded? Like, are you fucking stupid? What are you talking about? Like, you must be delusional. You're not delusional. You must be like so sub-fucking human IQ. You must be stupid if you think that's the problem. Like, oh, the real problem is that there's too many people who have a different fucking skin color from me. What are you fucking talking about? Oh, the real problem is that the other people have different fake religions. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, the real problem is that there's fucking any of this shit. Like, fuck, what is that? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, don't you see? Don't you fucking see that this is all like a fake world? That this is all like fucking like a literal torture chamber for you and I? That this entire thing is set up just to hurt you? And that the only possible course of action is to make it so that you never existed in the first place? And you're trying to fucking help people's working conditions? Like, what are you talking? What are you doing? What the fuck is that? Like, you're trying to do this like a floozy woozy shit, like, oh, it will help the white race, or fucking help the workers, or fucking help the, your particular fucking sexual fucking deviation or whatever. Not to say that like none of that's bad, right? Like, not to say that, well, racism is bad, but not to say that like trying to make the world a more livable place for you because you have stuff that you happen to be is like a bad thing. Like, obviously that's like an honest reaction to the conditions. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But it's just like, that's not related to the problem at hand here. That's like a little like thing. It's like a little thing on top of it. It's like that's literally a you problem. And you should deal with you problems. If it's a you problem, that means it's your job to deal with it. So you should deal with it, and I will support you dealing with it, right? But it doesn't have anything to fucking do with the fact that TikTok is in my fucking house spying on me. It doesn't have anything to fucking do with the fact that Mark Zuckerberg looks at me while I'm pooping and he takes the shit and eats it. It has nothing to do with that, right? This is like a fucking, it has nothing to do with the fact that like the fucking demiurge, that Yaldabaoth is literally fucking NTRing me in real life. It has nothing to do with that, right? And that's the real fucking issue here. The real issue is something that we have no power to fucking solve, and anyone who thinks they have power to solve things is just deluding themselves in order to fucking like feel good, in order to feel like they're doing something and feel like they're right, because we have this concept of like correctness, and we have this concept of like to be that truth is beauty and all of this shit, right? And if truth is beauty, then beauty is truth. So it's all fucking it's all aesthetics. Right? It's all like, what would be the best moral aesthetic to go with? Like, would it be the best moral aesthetic to be like, the government's bad? All the cool people, all of the cool people that the fucking mainstream media, that like the British, hey, back in fucking 1970s, right? Back in the fucking 1970s, there was this small like underground movement of like drug addicts and like nihilists, and the British music press, who were like, a bunch of like pretentious fucking academic people, like latched onto it because they felt that music was inauthentic at the time. So they latched onto it and like promoted it super fucking hard, and that's punk. And they latched onto this one band called the Sex Pistols, right, and promoted them as like, these guys are like invented fucking punk, and the Clash, and like shot them into like superstardom, ruining their lives, or their lives were already ruined, and ruining culture forever, because now everything has to be punk. You can't, if you're not punk, you're lame. I'm fucking punk as shit, right? Because I'm not fucking lame. But that's because I bit the fucking bullet. That's because I died in the trash. That's because I burned to death, right? To become punk is like the ultimate cruelty to like, I don't know, fucking something. Like, all because of this fucking decision, and because of like a callback, a nostalgia for fucking Bohemia, and all of that because of a fucking nostalgia for Bohemia, right? Which was also just an actual like a fucking petty bourgeoisie rebellion of like rich artists and shit. Who were like, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. It doesn't fucking matter who did it, right? Literally doesn't matter who did it. It doesn't matter what their fucking classes were or whatever. Karl Marx was a rich person or whatever. Like none of that matters. But like, was Karl like what does that matter if you have something good to say? It doesn't matter because it's all fucking lies. And so it's like you listen to this angry music, and you're a teenager, so you've got like hormones in your body, and so you're like angry, and then you decide to base your entire fucking ideology on that. That's what I did, right? That's literally what I did. I listened to angry music that the British music press in the 70s decided was cool because they were a bunch of academics who were bored of their like cushy academic lives, so they decided to like promote this fucking like obscure musical movement, which then like blew the fuck up because it spoke to something in society at the time, and then that fucking ruined my life. 50 years later, or whatever. That fucking like. So because of that, like I decided to have incomprehensible political beliefs, and so did you. And either you're like, it's all fucking. Fuck. I'm running out of steam. I'm running out. My ideas are becoming less concrete and less easy to translate into language. So that's making me run out of steam. The thoughts are becoming more floaty and anglicized, less anglicized, more fucking Parisian. My thoughts are becoming more Parisian, and so it's harder to talk about them. Like something in French. Ah, mon vieux, fucking mon ami. Ah merde. Je pense que le capitalisme c'est mon dick, mon fucking dick, mon fucking cock. Le capitalism, why? That's fucking Japanese. I see all these fucking languages in your head. They fucking get mixed up. Like capitalism, wa, hidoi desu ne. But ne isn't even Japanese. Ne comes from fucking Dutch. So it's like, and then you gotta learn Dutch, and then you gotta learn fucking Austrian, and then you gotta learn Proto fucking Germanic, and you gotta learn fucking Proto Indo-European, which isn't even a real fucking language, and you end up being Horolov, and you speak Gothic to everyone, and everyone's like, wow, you speak Gothic? That's fucking sick. And you're like, yeah, I know, I'm fucking sick. And it's true, but like, it doesn't matter because like, you're never gonna actually bring back the Gothics, the Goths. You're never gonna bring back the Goths, and no matter how much Bauhaus you listen to, no, I can listen to as much fucking New Order as I want. I can listen to as much Bauhaus as I want. I can listen to as much, dark wave as I want, and I'm never gonna bring back the Gothic language. Isn't that depressing? I think it's depressing. If you don't think that's depressing, you're probably a Marxist.